show you how to compile Marlin for your 3D printer. This is the firmware that most 3D printers run. A lot of 3D printers come from the factory with a very, very old build of Marlin with not that many features, and if you start to install upgrades here and there, you're probably going to need to recompile it at some point. So I just kind of wanted to cover the basics of that in this video. There are other videos on YouTube that cover the same topic, but this video is going to focus primarily on the tools you need to install and the process for actually compiling it and flashing it. There are some configuration changes that you'll need to make based upon your printer and how it's configured. I will certainly show you what I changed for my Ender 3 Pro with a Creality 4.2.7 motherboard, as well as a BLTouch plugged into the BLTouch port on the motherboard. So without further ado, let's get started. So today we're going to be downloading compiling Marlin 2.0.9.3, which is the latest build as of this writing. Now, before you download Marlin, you're going to need some tools to actually compile it. And the first of those tools, and there's different ways to do this, is just probably the easiest way, is to download a tool called Visual Studio Code. You can go to code.visualstudio.com/download. This is a free install. So let's just download this. Hopefully it's not too large in size. Save. Oh wow, 75 megs. So that's just about done up here. Let's go ahead and run through this installation process. This is a kind of the free version of Microsoft's commercial IDE called Visual Studio. Like I said, it's free, so you don't have to buy anything. So I just kind of next through this installation wizard. Nothing too fancy so far. Now this may take longer or shorter depending upon the speed of your computer. Mine is not the speediest thing in the world, but it works. Pick it up when this is done. Now that Visual Studio Code has been installed, let's launch it. And then we want to go to plugins. Where is that? Extensions, sorry. And then I'm going to go to search up here and under extensions for Platform IO. I think this is it. Let's click here and click on install. I think this will take a few minutes as well. Okay, now it's installed. Oh wait, now we're downloading still. While Platform IO is installing, you're going to want to head over to marlinfw.org. And we're going to be installing, like I said before, Marlin 2.0.9.3. Now there's different variations of Marlin, so I prefer to stick to the release versions, which is called here latest release. You can also go to a nightly build down here. You can, but I prefer to stick with the release ones. They don't change as often. They change every couple of months versus nightly down here. You don't get the latest bug fixes, but normally that's not a problem. I found the release to be pretty stable. So you're going to want to head over here. Let's see. No, let's click View/Download on Configurations. This will take you to GitHub, which is where Marlin actually lives. So notice here we say Release 2.0.9.3. We're going to go and download that zip file for the configurations. Okay. Now while that's downloading, we're going to head over to I'm going to click on Marlin firmware here to actually download the Marlin software itself. So I'm going to click on Marlin here. So again, they've separated the actual source code for Marlin and the configuration files that go along with it. Now I'm going to change this branch from 2.0.x, which is I think one of those bug fix branches. I'm going to go to 2.0.9.3 so that the source code matches the actual configuration files. We're going to click on Code and download again here. And we're just going to save that. Let those download for a minute. Now that the files have finished downloading, we're just going to right click and we're going to extract each one. So I'm just going to use 7-zip, which I have installed on this computer. Just going to extract. Same thing with the Marlin source code itself. By now, hopefully, the Platform IO Visual Studio Code extension is finished downloading. You can see down here it's finished. Please restart Visual Studio Code, so we'll do that. So I've already done the hard work of figuring out what configuration changes I need to make for my printer, which again is the Creality Ender 3 Pro with the BLTouch and the Creality 4.2.7 motherboard. I've already figured out what changes I need to make to the stock Marlin configuration files. So I've saved those from the last time I updated Marlin. Those files are stored here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare these modified files from the configuration examples that come with this new version of Marlin. So if we go to examples here, go to Creality Ender 3 Pro, Creality 4.2.7, you see those same 4 files. And I copied those into, where was it? Under, come on, where is it? It's here somewhere, I promise. Oh, here. So under Marlin 2.0.9 to 3 to the Marlin directory. So those are those 4 files. Now what we're going to do is we're going to compare my modified configuration files from 2.0.9.2 with the new examples that ship with Marlin 2.0.9.3. And for that, I'm going to use a free tool, file comparison tool called WinMerge. You can download this for free off the internet. Just do a Google search. And I'm just going to compare, like I said, the Marlin 2.0.9.3/Marlin directory with the Marlin 2.0.9.2/Marlin directory. So this should show us what's changed between my modified configuration files and the new examples that ship with Marlin 2.0.9.3. And that's important because they may have added new features or whatnot. We want to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples here. So let's go. We see there's 4 files that are different. So let's look first at configuration.h. So we see here they advanced the version. We'll copy that. We'll copy that to the right. I'm sorry. We'll keep that. We'll keep that. So we have 2.0.9.3 on the left, 2 on the right. So we're going to keep this change. It looks like we're doing something with the motherboard Creality. Okay, we'll keep that. This is a change that I made, so I'm going to copy that to the left. Looks like this is, oh, alright, so this is just defined somewhere else in the file. We'll just leave that. Don't know what this is, but I probably had a good reason for taking that. We'll leave that because it's commented out. Doesn't really matter anyway. This is an important one. This is for the BLTouch. Now my BLTouch setup doesn't use the Z-Min probe. It uses the dedicated BLTouch port on the motherboard. So I'm going to take this, copy this to the left. I'm going to copy this. This uses the BLTouch for homing, which is important. I'm going to copy this to the left. So that's all changes that I made previously. So I'm going to take this one. This enables the BLTouch. So these are my nozzle offsets, which I calculated previously. We'll take those. Probe enable, disable. I don't know what this one is. I guess we'll just see what happens, right? We want the bilinear bed leveling. We'll take that one. We want Z safe homing. I definitely didn't do this one, so we'll leave that there. It's commented out. This looks like new functionality in this version. This stuff isn't going to matter because it's all commented. I probably should have mentioned this double slash is essentially a comment, so anything that has a double slash in front of it really doesn't matter a great deal. All commented out, all commented out. Okay, so what's all this stuff? This is all commented out. This is all commented out. Okay, so I think we're good here. So let's save configuration.h on the left. Now let's move on to configuration.adv.h. Again, we'll keep this version. All commented out, commented out. Define chamber made. Okay, so that's fine. So this is essentially the same as this one. I think this is all essentially the same, just white space, which doesn't really matter. Just added a comment. I realize this is kind of tedious, but you kind of get the idea. You know what? Let me just finish doing this, and I'll pick you guys up once I've merged over all those changes. Okay, got all those changes merged over to the 2.0.9.3 version of Marlin. Hopefully I did everything right there. If not, we'll find out pretty quickly when this compilation fails. If anybody wants to copy these configuration files, again, they should be good for a Creality Ender 3 Pro with the Creality 4.2.7 motherboard, with the BLTouch, and with the BLTouch plugged into the dedicated BLTouch port. Those configuration files should work for you. So now we're going to go back into Visual Studio Code, and we're going to go to Open Folder, and we're going to select the directory where this new version of Marlin resides. And let's see what happens. Yes, let's trust it. Why not? Haven't done this in a little while, so this might take me a minute to reorient myself. So I think it's recognized that this is a Platform I/O project. I think, we just click this check mark here to do the compilation. So now Platform I/O is taking, oh wait, that doesn't look right. Mega 256. Well, I guess we'll find out in a minute if this compiles. Yeah, you know what? I forgot to change this. Stand by. User error. Yeah, that was my bad. I forgot to change or compare this platformio.ini file with the between the new Marlin, the 2.0.9/3 and the 2.0.9.2 that I'm running currently. And there was a change I made here. So out of the box, Marlin comes configured for an Atmel Mega 256.0 microcontroller, and I realize I'm getting really deep into the weeds, but the Creality 4.2.7 motherboard doesn't run a Mega 256.0. It runs an STM32 ARM-based microcontroller, so this had to be updated here. So now, let's try to compile again, and we should not see this error message here. Build environment Mega 256.0 is incompatible. Good that you see me mess up, because I'm sure first time you do this, you'll mess up too, and it's not a big deal. So it should be compiling. Now notice that we're not seeing Mega 256.0 anymore here. La 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 la. Cue the elevator music. She's a-thinking. Let's see if she's actually doing it. Doing something. CPU's doing something. It's thinking. Let's look at the output window. Does it actually tell us anything useful? Not really. We'll give it a minute. A couple minutes later, and downloaded some stuff, and now it's actually doing the compilation right here. You see compiling, compiling, compiling. So this will probably take a couple minutes as well, and if all goes well, you should have a firmware that you can then put on an SD card and flash to your machine. If all goes well, a couple minutes later, you should have a success message like this one, and you see it took I don't know, 165 seconds or so to build the firmware, which is located in here in the PIO build directory under STM32F103 ret6_Creality. And you notice that the firmware, you're looking at the, it's a file, a .bin file. There's other files in there, but this is the one that you want to stick on the SD card. And I believe the bootloader on the Creality 4.2.7 motherboard requires a unique firmware file name every time to work correctly, which is why you see that they put the date and the time on here. So let's put this on an SD card and see if it works. Alright, so again, here's our firmware file name right here, and I've navigated to that directory in Windows Explorer. So I'm going to grab this file right here, which is the same as this one. I'm going to drag that onto the SD card. And there we go. So now it's time to pull this SD card out and stick it in the SD card slot of the printer. Got you guys set up in the camera tripod. No longer doing screen cap. Let's turn the 3D printer on. Let's just see what it looks like now before we put the firmware, the SD card with the firmware in there. Powering up. So you can see we're on Marlin 2.0.9.2, hopefully. Maybe you can't. Hard to deal with that glare. It was actually better with the light off. So there's our version of Marlin. Now let's stick our SD card in there and reboot it. SD card's in. Turn it back on. Black screen or blank screen is normal. So bootloader is loading the new firmware. There we go. Look at that, 2.0.9.3. That's normal as well. All done. Okay, so that was the hardest part. Now, if you made some significant configuration changes, like you just installed a BLTouch or you added some other piece of hardware, I strongly recommend you do a test print. And when you do the test print, have your hand ready on that power button, because I've seen some things go wrong pretty quickly. I've seen the extruder nozzle dive into one of those soft bed plates. This is a glass one. So just be extra careful. Have your hand on that power button to shut it down if anything goes wrong, because it's not forgiving. So let's see if we can do a test here. I'm going to do an auto home. Now here we should use the BLTouch for the Z-axis stop. So let's see what happens. I'm going to have my hand on, not on the power button, but on the power cable going to the wall outlet. So everything looks fine so far. The BLTouch is deployed, which is good. So everything's working fine so far. Again, I'm not expecting any problems, but perfect. That's exactly what we want to happen. If you just install the BLTouch or you're making adjustments, have your hand on that power button. Power button or power wire, whatever you want to call it. Cannot stress that enough. Super important. All right, now that that's done, let's do a bed leveling procedure. So I'm just going through the menu over on the right. I'm trying to remember where it is here. No, it's not in there. Z offset, no. BLTouch. Menus are so confusing. Let's do motion level bed. There we go. So I initiated the bed leveling procedure. So it should do a 3x3 grid with the BLTouch, sampling the height of the bed at 9 different points total. But I think it does an auto home first. Kind of like watching water boil. And it should come back over here, 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 and so on. So it's sampling the first point. Got it. Anybody have any elevator music? Sorry about the strobing effect that you probably see. That's from the LEDs. Let me see. Let me try a different lighting scenario. Let's see if this helps. Let's turn these lights off. Is that better? Yeah, strobing's gone. That's cool. Now, anytime I do a bed level, I like to store that. So go to configuration, the menu over here, configuration, and go all the way down to store settings, because remember, we just reset the EEPROM, and I believe the bed level settings are stored in the EEPROM. So now we've stored them back. All right, let's do a test print now. Do something quick and simple. Okay, I've downloaded a Benchy, so I guess I lied. It's not going to be a quick test print. It's going to be maybe an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, somewhere around there. I downloaded that 3D Benchy, which is kind of the standard 3D print benchmark. I'm going to let that print. I'm not expecting any differences or any problems, but again, just to kind of show you that the printer does work after updating your firmware. You can do this. It's really not that difficult. The hardest part is just figuring out what configuration adjustments you need to make. So again, I'll leave all those. I'll try to find a way to get all those to you guys. Maybe I'll leave them on Google Drive, OneDrive, something like that. But again, they're only designed for this specific printer configuration. It may not work with yours. So if you have a Creality Ender Pro with the 4.2.7 motherboard with the BLTouch installed on the BLTouch port on the motherboard, this firmware should work for you. So let's pick it up in a bit when we start printing. There are some other configuration options that are burned into the firmware that I didn't mention before. So you may have to make some additional adjustments. So for example, your probe offsets, which is how far the probe is from the actual nozzle, those might vary a little bit from printer to printer. That's kind of printer specific and burned into the firmware, but you can adjust that through the display afterwards if you want to. The other one that's kind of specific to each printer is the Z offset. There is a configuration wizard in the firmware that is burned into the firmware, so that default value is burned into the firmware, but there is a wizard you can run through also in the display to set your Z axis, your Z offset. So again, while the configuration files that I'll try and provide to you are somewhat generic, they are also somewhat specific to this printer. So you may have to make some adjustments after you flash it, or maybe you could just make them in your own. Maybe it'll work for you, I don't know. But just be mindful of that. I don't want you guys to expect this is going to work out of the box with no changes whatsoever. So again, this should work for any printer that's like this, but you may have to make some tweaks to some specific configuration options. And we are getting ready to start printing, so like I said before, I'm going to be at the ready with the power just to shut it off in case something goes wrong. Not expecting problems, but just be prepared. I think it's going to do another bed leveling procedure. You want to do the bed leveling procedure when the bed is hot too, because obviously when things get hot, they expand. And I guess it's not going to. Let's get this little scraggly bit out of the way. Okay, so I see filament coming out and sticking to the bed. Which is a good sign. Does it come off easily? Yeah, it does. So I think we're going to be good here. So let's see if that first layer adheres to the bed. Seems to be. All right, let's let it chooch for a while. Okay, it's a couple hours later, and our benchy is done. I got distracted with some other stuff, so kind of lost sight of this one a little bit. Let's see how she looks. Came off the bed nice and clean. I wouldn't really expect to see really any quality differences from a firmware update, but this is more to just confirm that everything still works correctly. I think it's a fairly nice quality print right there. So yeah, it is possible to flash your own version of Marlin. It is not really that difficult. And for anybody that wants to know how to do this or wants my configuration files, I'm happy to share them, provided I can find a way to share them. Let's go to printer info. So yeah, now we're running on Marlin 2.0.9.3. This is from actually December 25th. That's Christmas of 2021. That's the date that this was released, I guess. So anyway, hope this video demystified some of the Marlin compilation process. It's really not that difficult. Just to summarize, you need Visual Studio Code, you need the Platform IO extension, you need the Marlin source code, you need the Marlin example configuration files. You need to adjust those Marlin sample configuration files. Then within Visual Studio Code, you compile the firmware. Then you stick it on an SD card and stick it in the printer. It's really no more complicated than that. It's not difficult, guys. If anybody runs into any trouble, let me know. If you like this video, please subscribe. Stay safe and thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.